say, come on up, we mix you up a dirty martini. The dirty martini gon' call you in by Riverside. Night begins. There's a little place you can go where you're gonna get you a dirty martini. Come on now.
Should we give it one more minute or get started?
I guess we can go ahead and get started with your introduction, Megan.
Okay. Well, thank you to Root River Jam for the pre-event music. Welcome to Electrifying Your Home, What Does It Take? Part of our Earthfest celebration this year. We're excited to have you here with us virtually. Our Earthfest steering committee and partners have put together a full lineup of virtual events on all topics Earth related. We invite you to visit our brand new website at earthfestrochestermn.org and follow us on Facebook at facebook.com/earthfestrochestermn to sign up for upcoming events.
Megan.
Today's events have been made possible by our sponsors that you've been seeing on the pre-event slideshow, including Fresh Energy, Mayo Clinic, AARP, Conservation Minnesota, Destination Medical Center, Daguna Consulting, Minnesota Public Radio, Sierra Club North Star Chapter, Solar Connection, Christ United Methodist Church, HGA, People's Food Co-op, Rochester Area Foundation, XRG Concepts, and Zumbro Valley Autobahn. If you have any technical issues as we move through today's event, you can contact me in the chat or via email, which I will add to the chat right now. And keep your microphones off unless invited to ask questions, and you can submit questions in the chat as well, which will be monitored throughout the event. This session is being recorded, and you will be sent a link to the recording in the next few days. So with that, let's get started with today's topic, which I will hand over to Ivan Eidso.
Thanks, Megan. Yeah, I want to thank everyone for joining us for tonight. We have three presenters tonight, and then we'll have a Q&A after that. This is a topic that I'm pretty passionate about, so pretty excited about this to have be able to put this together. So I appreciate the three presenters. So Drew, questions in the chat. I guess Megan took care of all of my little notes to business notes. So let's go ahead and get started with Drew Larson. Go ahead, Drew.
All right, thanks, Ivan. Get my presentation up here just 1 second. But I am Drew Larson. By day, I work for a local utility. By night, I am an energy geek, as we all like to be, right? That's why we're here. Figure out, oh, hang on just 1 second. I apologize. I was right there at the beginning, and now I'm not. Let's try this one more time here. All right. Everybody should see my slide. There we go. I apologize. Anyway, so my journey started about 2018 when my family decided that we wanted to move closer to downtown. This is just kind of a slide showing some of the reasons we wanted to do that. We were living in the outskirts of Rochester in suburbia, A fairly new home, 2004, didn't really need much, needed some updating here and there. But we really wanted to be close to our work, be able to walk to our work, lower our carbon footprint from driving to and from. So I bike to work now, and my wife was able to walk to work. My kids walk to school. We're close to the action, right? So all the restaurants, all those types of things, and we're close to the trails, and we have public transport right here. So I utilize my bike the most, but so when we bought the house, it was a fixer-upper. So we bought it in 2018, and the area that we wanted is all old homes. So it was built in 1937, and it needed a lot of updating. Well, this was a perfect opportunity to retrofit it properly. So, of course, you always have conflicting priorities, right? My wife and I always had conflicting priorities when it came to this. Do we go for the aesthetics first, or do we go for the energy? Of course, the energy geek in me wanted to do all things energy, right? But it's really hard to spend a lot of money for something you can't see. So we had to juggle a little bit and compromise a little bit, and I think we ended up really well. So, like I said, we have a 1.5-story house, which is probably one of the most difficult types of homes to retrofit insulation into. So in our home, what we did is we were able to take off the roof. It needed new shingles anyway, so we had the contractor remove the roof and put spray foam into the slant portion, and fill the behind the knee walls with spray foam to perfectly seal it up. And then, of course, the space above was insulated as well. So this did two things. Number one, we air sealed the roof, but also we were able to add a lot more insulation. One of the problems that a 1.5-story house has is ice dams. So it tends to get cold air or warm air, whether there is leakage or whether it's just air moving through there. It'll melt the snow under the bottom, and you'll have ice dams. Most of the time, that's towards the edge of the roof. You notice them, and of course, our house wasn't any different when we purchased. Had heat tape all the way around it. So when you do that, you have to put some type of ventilation underneath this. We actually put a deck on top of a deck of the roof to create an air gap and an air cavity. Added eaves and added a porch as well. So on the exterior, we went with a continuous exterior insulation. This is probably some it was very difficult to find a contractor for this because a lot of contractors don't feel comfortable putting on exterior insulation. And talking at our green drinks earlier, Paul was kind enough to share his experience that he had difficulty too, and ended up doing it himself. I found a contractor that was willing to compromise with me, and they wanted to go with the Zip R sheathing, which is about a 2 3/4 inch thick R13 sheathing that goes all the way around the house. With this, we put new windows on the outside of that sheathing as well, so they were able to flash those as well. So now is our opportunity to go all electric. So when we did first buy the house, we needed to upgrade our water heater at the time, so we just went heat pump right away. I knew that the heat pump might be a little bit more expensive, which it turned out not to be. And in fact, we turn out loving our heat pump. It is as efficient, or excuse me, as cost effective as natural gas to run. Plus, we get some side benefits. We get some side benefits of dehumidification in the basement. We just have it naturally or vented. We don't have it vented into the ductwork like some folks do. This is just vented into the basement. So it dehumidifies our basement, and we have a ventless dryer that puts some moisture back into the air. So now you have some latent heat in the air, and it removes that. So they kind of work in harmony that way. And of course, we went with electric stove. Now was the time that we could go to all electric heat too, with the heat pump. So we started with a manual J and determined that our house was going to be right around that 42,000 BTU mark. We know that manual J's are a little bit on the conservative side. So we figured we could undersize the heat pump just a little bit and use resistance backup heat in doing that. So for sizing a heat pump, you don't want to oversize a heat pump because you're going to do yourself a disservice in the summertime because it's going to short cycle and you're going to end up with humid, clammy air, cold air in the house. So you want to be able to size it accordingly. Now, inverter type heat pumps that are variable speed allow for a variation in that, but you still don't want to oversize too much because if you get too big of a heat pump, they're less efficient as well. So, and there is a problem if you look at just AHRI ratings. AHRI ratings for a heat pump only rates them at 47 degrees and 17 degrees. There is a wonderful little website, the Northeast Energy Efficiency Partnership, puts out statistics and data on heat pumps down to 5 degrees. So you can find out what heat pumps will do down to 5 degrees. I can show you that a little later after everybody's done. And then I finally got the heat pump installed. It was a long a long journey to get here because number one, we did all the installation upgrades. So this just happened this last year in 2020. So in 2018, I started with the roof. 2019 was the siding and windows. And then 2020, we put in the electric heat pump. Finding a contractor to put in an electric heat pump and saying that you don't want any backup heat besides a little resistance heat was difficult. In fact, we really only found one that would do it for us. And this is the solution that we had come up with, which was a Daikin Fit heat pump. It's a 3-ton heat pump. We have an energy recovery ventilator. And then we put in 15 kW resistance heat. So 15 kW resistance heat will give us about 52,000 BTU, which is way more than I needed. And I didn't use most of that, but it was more of a safety factor at that point in time. The biggest thing that I would recommend anybody do is to put in some type of a measurement so you can actually see what things are happening. I put in a sense energy monitor. So this is a set of CTs that go around your main, current transformers that go around your mains. And it does identify items. It'll identify heat loads and some motor loads and things like that. But then you got a couple of separate CTs that'll go around. You can set them around specific items. I set them around my heat pump. So you can see at this point in time, in the upper right, that my water heater was going at this point in time. My heat pump was just idling at that point. My main fridge, my always on, which is unidentified items like a router, computer monitor, or whatever it might be. There was a learning curve, definitely a learning curve. So the Daikin Fit, I don't think they have too many installations in cold climate, right? So when my contractor left, and I won't name them because I don't know if they did a very good job. I don't think they did a very good job, but they basically left saying, all right, if you want to run this thing without any backup heat, you program it yourself. And I did. So I put in some limits for backup heat to make sure that the backup heat didn't run at anything above -5 degrees, which turned out to work out extremely well, except there were some programming issues that I'm still working with Daikin on. And then the defrost cycle. So every heat pump will go through a defrost cycle, and that's kind of shown in the bottom right picture there. So what happens when they get below the dew point is frost or moisture will build up. If it's below freezing, it'll freeze, and then it has to go through a defrost cycle, basically heating up the coils again to get water to drip off. The recovery time of a heat pump when you get down to that cold temperatures are much longer. And of course, it sounds a little different. Not bad, just different. The biggest problem in my house was the condensation. This was something that I knew was going to happen, but I didn't realize how much. So my heat pump in January months, when it was really humid and right around that freezing temperature, it poured out a lot of moisture. I had 5-inch of ice there, and I ended up chipping away. So this year I did not have a drip pan underneath there at the beginning. It was just raised off the ground by 12 inches, but it actually was shutting back into the house, and I did not want it to creep up on the siding. So I put a drip pan there to get it away. Ended up chipping this away. So this summer I'm looking at a different way to shed that water away from the pump. Cold hit February, so negative 16 degrees. I'm still producing heat. This is an actual thermal image from my register at minus 16 degrees. So I was putting out 80-degree heat. It did cycle through backup heat every once in a while, but I was able to get down. So results. This is kind of what everybody likes to see, right? So I had a 95% gas furnace before. Not an inefficient gas furnace, not 100% obviously, but this is what it compared. So in comparing 2019, 2020 numbers for my gas furnace to the heat pump and the heating degree days, which were actually more this year, through the end of March, which is my billing data, I went through just under 4,000 kWh in my heat pump and backup resistance heat. And I went through about 426 therms in my natural gas using rates that I currently had. So using the rates that I used last year for the gas, there wasn't a lot of difference. Now, this doesn't include more of the shoulder months where heat pumps really, really excel. You have COPs, the coefficient of performance is much better on a heat pump when you're in that 40-degree temp. So days like today, it's much cheaper to run a heat pump than it is natural gas. So my lessons learned was condensation control is very important. And if I were to do it again, I would actually not do just one system. Right now, mine is one air handler controlled by one heat pump, basically replacing a gas furnace, putting in a heat pump. If I was to do it again, I would replace that air handler, or I would still put in that air handler with a smaller heat pump and run a separate system for my upper load. Number one, I would have more control throughout my house, but I would have some redundancy in case I would have a failure. Controls are extremely important. I struggled with that during February with the backup heat lockout. And it didn't seem to be working correctly. I had a couple updates from Dakin, but they're still working through some issues. So, not necessarily good controls for everything, but make sure your controls do what you want them to do. So that's kind of where the energy monitor came in. I would have no idea that the backup heat was being activated had I not had the energy monitor. And I would have found that out in my bill at the end of the month. And don't settle. I think I didn't spend quite enough time finding the right contractor. I wish I would have spent more time doing that. I think contractors are becoming more versed in heat pumps, but I don't think it's quite there yet. There are a few of them out there that are really good. The mini splits, I think there's quite a few contractors out there that are putting mini splits, but if you're looking at full house air handlers to replace a gas system, not quite as good. So my main suggestions: seal up the house first. When I say seal up the house, I mean for air tightness. You do need ventilation, but it needs to be controlled ventilation. Number one, this is for moisture control. This is for air leakage into areas that you don't want it. So for mold issues, and then add insulation. Insulation is important. But don't be afraid to retrofit your older house. You don't have to make an older house passive house to be able to use a heat pump. And I'll probably get flack for this, but don't be afraid to go gas backup. So if you have an older house that is really leaky, and you only need to replace an air conditioning unit, replace it with a heat pump, because you can still use your, it's a lower cost solution right away. And you can still upgrade to a full heat pump, but you're getting 75% of your heating done by that heat pump, and you're still going to save yourself money. You're not getting all the benefits of not having carbon monoxide in your house or having that monthly natural gas bill or things like that, but you're getting rid of 75% of the issue. Placement requires planning, so think about that for water control. And don't be afraid to undersize. So when I think about heat pumps, everybody says, I want to size it to the load I need. For heat pumps, we only reach that design temperature a few hours out of the year. That's a very minimal cost. So don't be afraid to undersize it a little bit. Also, heat pumps can go past a little bit, where a normal motor can only go up to 100%. A heat pump with an inverter drive can go 125%. Mitsubishi is known for these, and they make excellent heat pumps. So that's about it. I'm going to hand it off to Matt, I believe, and we're going to hear about a really nice house.
Hi, everyone. Just a second. All right. Can people see this?
Yeah.
All right. Thank you. So my wife and I were interested in making a homestead here in Rochester. We were originally from the Midwest and then headed out to New York for about 15 years and then came back to Minnesota for a job at Mayo. And we were interested in making a homestead. And then we thought, well, maybe we were interested in making an energy efficient all electric house. And of course, that's going to be new construction. So this is where and what we lived in previously to kind of give you an idea of how much energy a house uses in general. So in Austin, New York, we lived in a 1,400 square foot four square house from the 1920s with single pane windows, bad insulation, used heating oil, natural gas, and electricity, and it used 150 million BTUs per year. Then we moved to Rochester and lived in a rental for a couple of years while we were looking for land in the house. This was an upgrade, a little bit bigger, double pane windows, 2x6 construction with pink insulation. Got rid of the oil using natural gas and electricity. This dropped us down to 110 million BTUs. You can see from the heating column here that it basically halved the number of BTUs that were used for heat. And now we're looking to build something new and then using various energy efficient things to try and get the heating load down, like triple pane windows, double stud walls, spray foam, and then transition to using only electricity. So we did most of the research ourselves. There wasn't a lot of expertise in town. And so in order to really engage a contractor to do what we wanted them to do, you had to come with the knowledge and the force to say, this is what we want, and they'll say no, and this is what we want, and they'll say no, and eventually they give in. I would do a lot of research. So Green Building Advisor is a good place to go to research everything about green building, but not only green building as in, like good for the planet, but like energy efficient building. And so we use two particular case studies. So Uphill House, a net zero house in Cambridge, New York, and a series of net zero homes in Massachusetts by Carter Scott. And both of the features of those builds were, lots of insulation, tight houses, no air infiltration. And then when you got to a certain point, then you could heat it with a single mini split. You didn't have to have it piped to all parts of the house, just the fact that you made basically a thermos, and then you put a heat source anywhere in the house, it would heat the house. So that's what we wanted. That's what we went with. And so these are 8 factors to do this. So basically do super insulation. So a raised hill roof. We went with a double stud wall, a weather tight enclosure, which means that's going to be airtight. You don't want any air getting in or out. Whatever heat you make inside the house, you want it to keep in there. We went with high performance windows that are not only good as far as an R value, but also have anti-air infiltration mechanisms. And then, as Drew was saying, trying to force the heating, the HVAC contractors to put a properly sized heating and cooling system in the house so that it worked as efficiently as possible when it was working. And then we went with lots of passive solar principles. So having the majority of the windows face south, and then blocking the summer sun and letting the winter sun in. Once you tighten up your house, you need to use an HRV to give you fresh air without losing the energy that's in that air. Another passive principle is to have a thermal mass in your main part of the house so that when you have solar radiation coming in, it's able to be absorbed by a thermal mass to moderate the temperature. And then, of course, as we're all talking about now, we all move to energy efficient but electrical appliances. So this is the design we came up with: a 2-story house with a 1/3 basement. So basically, all of the bedrooms are on the top floor, and the kitchen, living room, laundry, and a little bath is on the main floor. One of the big features is this open to above region in the middle. So here and here, that allows any heat generated down below, either by the heat pump or by the sun, to move to the upstairs. Here's just views from one end facing east versus west. So once again, the entire bottom floor is mainly open. And this is the floor that has the mini split heat pump. So on the left-hand side, when you look upstairs, there's a bathroom and a bedroom on that side. And on the right-hand picture, if you look upstairs, there's 2 bedrooms up there. And where the black is on the right-hand picture on the floor, that's where the basement is down below that. But basically a very open floor plan down on the bottom part where the heat pump is, there's no reason that the heat can't be distributed entirely through that space very easily, and then go up through the open space. So on the right-hand, upper right-hand picture is the final picture of what the house looks like. So it's very basic design, so that it's very easy to insulate. You don't have a bunch of funky shapes, so it's hard to insulate. Certainly a ton of windows. This is the south-facing side, so a ton of windows on the south-facing surface. And then we made a 3D model in SketchUp to do some modeling. So what I'm showing here is in SketchUp, you can say, what will the sun penetration be during certain months? So you can see in January, you have full penetration, and in March, kind of half to less. In June, there's no sun coming into the house. And then October, it picks up again. And then the final picture here is that we took a picture on January 8th of what it was supposed to look like and what actual penetration we got, and they were exactly the same. So this allowed us to design the overhangs on the roof to be 3 foot so that we didn't have any penetration of the sun during the summer months, but full penetration during the winter months. The wall detail, so we ended up with a staggered double stud 2x4 wall with 9.5 inches in between, filled with open cell spray foam insulation, giving us an R35. This not only provides, a great R value, but then it also provides a thermal break where you don't have any heat or cold transmuted through the studs. And I think this is one of the most critical things that we did, because we didn't go with a contractor, a builder that had any experience before doing an energy efficient house. And so the open cell spray foam covers up a lot of errors or
Potential leaks.
in
Yeah.
buildings. So it's basically just expands and fills up all of the problems, missed nail holes, bad sill joint seals, and then it fills the entire cavity that we made, and then they can shave down the front of it to make it a packed layer that's entirely filled. So that was very good for giving us a good R and also giving us a good air seal. So this just shows the attic detail where we had a raised heel roof, which allows you to fill the entire floor of the attic with insulation. You don't have like a lower amount on the area where the roof line hits the side of the house. I'm gonna keep on moving because I have a lot of slides. Windows. So we went with Wasco Windows, which is a window company out of Milwaukee. We went with triple pane UPVC windows that have an R factor of about 7. And they were in a similar cost to a relatively architectural Marvin Integrity window. And so this is like the third horse of the apocalypse here, that you have the insulation, you have the air barrier, and you have good windows. And we had to do this research ourselves and get quotes from these various window manufacturers and determine we want this. And we told our builder, this is the windows we want to go with. And he was like, okay,
Yep.
that's what we'll do.
Order it ourselves.
Yep. So they're European style windows, so they can tilt inward and then turn inward. So then, as we're talking about today, move everything to electric. What this allows us, one to do is to eliminate one of those bills, one of those fee structures. Out in the country where we are, we would have propane. Actually, what's the other one? Propane.
What?
Oh, it doesn't matter. All right. Well, let's say it's propane. So if we had like a second energy source, then that would mean we would have to pay for that, not only just the energy, but then the extra fee for that, having them bring that to us every month. So we have heating and cooling, hot water, laundry, cooking, we all move to electric. So we heat and cool with ductless mini splits, as Drew was saying in his presentation. So we have 2 independent 18,000 BTU Mitsubishi hyperheat compressors. So these are rated to work to -15. And in general are cheaper to install than a gas furnace and related ducting. We have 1 on the lower level. So these are independent. 1 outdoor unit talks to 1 indoor unit. So we have 1 on the lower level, mainly used for heating, 1 in the upper level, mostly used for cooling. We had to go round and round with the contractors and our builder. And we went through 3 contractors before we were able to cement what we wanted in place. It eventually worked out. Haley Systems did our system. We did have problems with passing code. So the building inspector came and saw our system and looked at our single heat pump, and we're like, that's not going to work. I can't pass that, because there's a thing in the code where you're supposed to have heating systems that are capable of maintaining a minimum indoor temperature of 68 degrees at a point 3 feet above the floor on the coldest day of the year. And he's like, you're going to close a door on one of those rooms upstairs, and you're going to have pipes freezing. And we're like, no, we're not. We studied this. We're all good. But he's like, no. So I already was expecting that. So I already had chosen this system on the right, these indoor cadet in-wall heaters. So instead of like baseboard heating, which are not very designerly, these kind of like meld into the wall and you just don't really notice them. So it costs money, and it certainly was useful for backup heat in case, during COVID, we have people working in bedrooms, and sometimes you just don't want to work, at 68 degrees. You want something a little bit warmer, and so they turn them on. But basically, we don't use them. So this is the big test. Is this going to work? So if we had air infiltration problems, if because we went with a basic builder, if we weren't able to seal the house, it was going to be kind of disastrous with our single point source heating. So what I'm showing in this graph in the upper right is the blower door tests from houses for certain areas. So blower door tests, what they do is they depressurize the house using one of these door fans to 50 pascals. So basically they're blowing air out, which makes the rest of the house want to suck air in. And then they can modify the fan gate size and speed to measure the air infiltration. So you can see back in the 1960s, the ACH 50s were in the 15 to 20 range. And then by 2009, it was code that you actually had to seal up the house enough to get less than 7 air changes per hour, ACH 50. And then recently not recently, but pretty far back, that was lowered to 3. So that's getting pretty tight. Our goal was to have an ACH 50 of less than 1. That's what we set our builder to. He's like, we want that. And using the spray foam and the really, really good windows, we got down to 0.62, which was excellent and a good sign that we're on our way. So here's an example of our passive solar heating. So sometime in the middle of January, when the temperatures outside were 10 to 20 degrees, we were able to turn off our heat pumps, our heat pump. And then you can see the temperature would go between 68 and 77 as the sun would come into the windows and heat the concrete floor. And then that would slowly dissipate till about 9 a.m. when the sun would come up again. So we could go back and forth, back and forth. And as long as the sun was out, we didn't have to have the heat pumps on. We were also able to survive the polar vortex. So we had a time frame where there was 3 consecutive minus 15 nights, followed by 2 consecutive minus 25 degree nights. And the minus 15 nights were handled just fine by the heat pump. So this is where the heat pump is on. And then there, usually when it gets minus 20, even minus 15, typically they're outside, it's actually sunny that particular day. And so we were able to actually, when it got down to minus 25, turn off the heat pump and have the sun bring us back up above 75. So,
How many more slides?
like two. So, so we were concerned that we put the heat pump water heater in the basement. And we were concerned because that is a non-heated space, would that actually use a lot more energy or make the basement really cold? So a heat pump water heater takes heat out of the air and puts it in the water, and then outputs cold air into the room. So you could actually see when people took showers or you did laundry or used the dishwasher, have the temperature drop. But we were fine. We used approximately the right, so we used 1,000 kilowatt hours per year, which is very close to what XRG and the Energy Guide suggested we would use. And the basement didn't get colder than 46. We installed solar panels in 2019, 9.8 kilowatt system. After rebate, $21,000. We have net metering with People's Electric. So basically only about 30% of that solar is used by the house. The rest of it's loaded up to the grid. So XRG, and energy auditing, and the people who did the blow dryer test predicted we'd use about 11,000 kilowatt hours per year. And indeed, in the first year we used 11.4 kilowatt hours generated. And in 2020, we generated even more. And in 2019, we used 10,637. And in 2020, used 11,438. So both years we were net zero with various surpluses. So
Is that your last one?
no. So basically 25% of our energy was used in heating, 10% in hot water, and 65% other. Keep on going. So here's our final slide. So how much do we lower our energy consumption? So you can see 150 million BTUs, drop that down to 110 million BTUs in our late 90s build. And now we're down to 35 million BTUs. And even more dramatic is how much we dropped the heating, which is what the whole point of the house was, is the insulation, the windows, and the blocking infiltration of air. So this is the heating ratio, which is BTUs per square foot per heating degree day, which is, how many days is it actually cold out? So of course in New York, it's a little less cold. So this is smaller, but of course we use way many more BTUs. So 13.2. Colder, bigger square footage, but dropped the number of BTUs you used in half. So now this is about 4 times as small. So that's what insulation will do for you. And now we're another 6 times smaller than that, down to 8,900 BTU, 8,900,000 BTUs per heating degree. And that is the end. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Matt. That was great. So now we've seen one existing house, one new house. So now Kevin Bright is going to talk about his upgrade. Kevin?
Sounds good. One sec, I'm just trying to find the file here. I have too many windows open. That's throwing me off. There you go. All right, well, thanks for having me. Yeah, my name's Kevin Bright. I'm the Energy and Sustainability Director for the City of Rochester and the DMC. And this is a little bit about kind of our energy efficiency journey at our house. As Ivan mentioned, mostly here just to talk through how to do this a little bit more over time, and one approach that's kind of been staged over the period of 5 years or so since we've moved in. So I just wanted to share this kind of initial graphic here around how to save energy within your home, and just a good practice with starting with the big energy users and work to the small. So I think you'll see this come up just part of the slides that I'll talk through today, but mostly, as the other presentations have pointed out, insulate as best you can, and then look to controls and then the equipment for the heating and air conditioning system, understanding that over half of the energy in Minnesota, in a home in Minnesota, is tied up with the heating and ventilation and air conditioning systems. And as much as you can, using home improvement projects to improve efficiency, I'll give a couple examples from that. And then again, if you haven't gotten a home energy audit from RPU or from the gas company, strongly encourage you to do that. And that's really kind of the path that we followed here, to see some of the improvements that we have. And then second, what's a good investment? So this is just a little graphic kind of showing what are some of the more impactful projects. And you can see how impactful they are by the amount of savings based on the width of the bar itself. So here, like upgrading your heating system to a variable speed heat pump, the orange here, replacing lighting with LEDs, replacing water heating systems to a hot heat pump water heater, for instance, are some of the tried, tested, and then also economically beneficial projects that are included on this graphic. All of these end up paying out and producing a positive net present value over the course of their life. So all of these are good ideas, and obviously some way more impactful than others too. So just want to include this in the slides as a point of reference, but also be referring to a lot of the projects that are included in this chart. So here's our house. We live in the, I guess, Bear Creek or Meadow Park neighborhood near Mayo High School. Our house was built in 1966. We moved in 2017. And upon moving, even before, we understood that the home heating and cooling systems were likely needed to be replaced at some point soon. Built in the 60s, there's some limited insulation. We found that out pretty quickly just by drafts within the house and how comfortable it felt. And overall, it was a well-maintained home, but the maintenance wasn't necessarily tied to energy efficiency, but other things around trim and how things looked and felt within the house. So there's just a quick timeline of how we moved through our projects. So quickly upon move-in, we did get a home energy audit. The primary finding from a home energy audit, if you haven't insulated your attic or updated it recently, is going to be insulate your attic. It's kind of a two-part process where they sealed any opening within the ceiling of the second floor exposed to the attic with spray foam, and then insulated to R60. The cost was somewhere in the neighborhood of $3,000 to do this, and had a payback at 2 to 3 years. To get it ready, I had to remove a bunch of 4x8 plywood planks that were stuck up there, but didn't fit through the existing ceiling opening. So that was a process of cutting up 4x8 plywood boards in the dark in order to make sure that we could let the insulators do their magic. But that was great. That made us pretty significant difference. Also, the ceiling hatch was enclosed and sealed, which made my son's bedroom feel a lot more comfortable. So a lot of this was energy efficiency, but also thermal comfort. Quickly after, pretty much at the same time, we replaced all the lighting in the house to LED. The cost to do that, maybe generously, was $500, but had a payback period of 1 to 2 years. Probably a little bit sooner, but I thought I'd be conservative for folks that are looking at this. Also, very soon after that, we replaced all the sink aerators and shower head within our house to low flow models. So our bathroom aerators are at, I think they're at 0.75 gallons per minute. Our shower heads at 1.5 gallons per minute. And then the toilets were original to the house, so they were about 3 or 4 gallon toilets. So we replaced those just to save water, and then also kind of just do some updating things. So as I mentioned, using home improvement projects as an opportunity to improve things. We replaced those toilets with a 1.28 gallon per flush model. The most expensive part of this $500 budget was by far the toilets, which are about $200 each, and all the shower heads and aerator replacements made up for the last $100 there. But a lot of the savings was mostly through the shower head, somewhat through the aerators, and then the savings for the toilets were significant, but there's not a whole lot of money savings there at the moment. We also then put in an electric range. It was a gas range to begin with, but we updated and modified our kitchen a little bit. So this also gave us a little bit more flexibility in the design of the kitchen itself. But again, paid a premium for an Energy Star model, which we were excited to do just because, again, this kind of stuff I'm passionate about, similar to Drew and the vetting wolves. In 2019, we replaced the hot water heater. We did have a gas heater, and we opted to replace it with a gas hot water heater. In order to replace it with an electric one, we needed to upsize our electric panel to a larger service, and we just weren't, as well as move it, because our electric panel was located under a bunch of water pipes within our house, which is no longer to code. So it was a little bit more involved than what I think how long we were ready to wait to get hot water in our house again. So we ended up at the moment to do a gas heater in 2019. There was a cost premium to that option, right, for an Energy Star model. Though the plan is kind of when this piece of equipment runs the course of its life, that we'll electrify it at that point. The other kind of identified, or one of the three identified insulation projects within the home, was to also spray foam our basement rim joists. So we moved forward with that project in 2020. Again, another improvement, air sealed, kind of where the concrete footing meets the actual wood part of your house, and making sure that any air that blows by doesn't suck heat out of your home. Again, made a significant difference in terms of how it felt, especially to be in the basement, particularly during the winter months, which made a big difference. There's a couple other smaller projects and air sealing projects that have occurred over the time. Replaced our front door, for instance, and other things, but this was mainly a lot of the energy efficiency projects. And then a couple of months ago, we replaced our air conditioning unit and furnace. So our 25-year piece of equipment lasted to 28 years old before we replaced it, which was generous. The cost premium to do so over kind of a gas furnace option was about $3,000, because we were buying kind of all this equipment at once. So the material, or the labor, was kind of roughly the same, but the material was a little more pricey. It has a payback period that we're expecting somewhere between a 3 to 5 year time period. So the top three findings from our home energy audit, as we mentioned, was to air seal the attic. So this is just some cellulose being sprayed in an attic. Ours was not that well lit. So just a photo for demonstration, I guess. Basement rim joists were also insulated. So just a quick graphic showing what that looks like. And then kind of the third one that we haven't moved forward with yet is insulating the cantilevers. So as you saw a picture of our house, our second floor is kind of cantilevered out, and we have this exposed area of our second floor, which some of our furnace ductwork is exposed to the elements in there. So there is insulation in there, but it's not air sealed. So we're planning on doing an air sealing project for this portion, this cantilever portion, this summer, and getting some of the materials ready to do that. This is a picture down here. This is a crew this morning. I said I needed some pictures for this presentation, so thumbs up for LED lights. Really kind of the process we used was to prioritize the fixtures that we use most, and replace those, and then over time replace the ones or bulbs that we use less frequently. If you're looking for some tips on lamp shape or color temperature, dimmable or not, those are all kind of important things to keep in mind as you're looking at LEDs to replace, and then RPU has some great lighting incentives, as well as Energy Star has light ratings. If you're planning to buy like an entirely new fixture, like a recessed can, they have Energy Star ratings for light fixtures as well. A little bit more information on the water conservation. So these are just the recommended flow rates from a sustainability perspective to shoot for as you're making these replacements. For toilet replacement, EPA has water sense ratings for all fixtures, urinals, toilets, otherwise. So I'd keep an eye out for that logo as those purchases are being made. And then we'll start moving towards capturing rainwater. It's kind of the next step outside. We have a little small south-facing garden. The gas company does provide free sink aerators and shower heads. If you're interested, the shower heads are all right. The kitchen sink aerator is probably in my opinion, the best piece of that kind of free kit that they offer. It's a little kind of handy thing where you can pull on the fixture to have a spray when you're cleaning dishes, and then also push it back up to get more consistent flow or higher rate of flow from the fixture to like fill up a pot. And then similar to Drew, Drew was actually quite helpful to me as I was working through this process of figuring out what to replace our gas furnace in our home and what type of system to move forward with. So we had an existing gas furnace that was 80,000 BTUs. And like I said, pretty old. We received quotes from 4 different HVAC contractors here locally, and we asked them to give us quotes for 2 things. New heat pump outdoor unit, air handling unit with electric backup contained within, or heat pump unit outside, and then a kind of furnace backup, gas backup in order to heat our home, or in this case, use the heat pump for most of the hours of the year and then use the gas backup when we needed to. The quotes ranged from $9,500 to $2,000. So the stories that we've heard already around contractors not really knowing what they're doing, I think some of the proof is in the pudding here, just of the quotes that were received themselves kind of being all over the place, as well as some of the equipment gave me like varying levels of assurance of whether or not they were meant to be together or how they should be properly kind of designed. We ended up moving forward with Superior Mechanical, and they recommended a Bosch system. One of the benefits was something that gave me confidence too, was the person quoting the system had this installed in their house. I don't know if they tell that to everybody just to make them feel better or not, but I fell for it if that was the case. And the other part of the Bosch system that I liked is that the electric backup was designed within the air handling unit cabinet. Some of the other companies were planning on wiring this electric backup heater themselves and kind of carving it into the system. And I didn't feel great about that. So decided to move forward with a system that kind of was always intended to have an electric backup as needed. So this is what we ended up moving forward with. All in, it was about probably a $10,000, $10,500 installation, and applied for an incentive for RPU, given that one of our pieces of equipment had failed, our air conditioning unit. So look forward to seeing how it works. We haven't really had to use it too often thus far. We installed it in early March with the nice weather. It definitely is sized a little bit. So it is 3 tons, so about 36,000 BTUs is the size of the heat pump. Given all the insulation work that we did in our house, as well as kind of the oversizing of the original system by at least 20%, we felt pretty confident that we would be in good shape, but we'll find out kind of coming up in this winter months. So if we're cold, Drew, we'll come over and sleep over at your house or something. Sounds like a date. All right. So what's left to do? Something we're looking at is, again, the basement cantilever insulation. Admittedly, I've called a number of insulating contractors to get a quote to do this, and they're either exorbitantly priced or they're so busy that they don't want to do it. So we're going to take it on. I feel pretty confident we could do it. Watched a couple of YouTube videos. That's all it takes, right? So here we go. And then we're also looking at some duct sealing, given that it's an older house. We know there are leaks. We did get one quote for duct sealing. I'm going to get another one, but the original quote was about $1,200 to seal the ducts, which I don't know. Figured I'd get a few quotes just to go from there. It seemed a little high to me. And I also have Christine, my partner, in the back of my head being like, how many insulating projects are we going to do, Kevin? Like, it's time to move on. So those are kind of the two things in the hopper for me anyways. And then upon equipment failure, like some of the things that we're looking at now, replacing appliances when we need to, and specifically the refrigerator, laundry machine, and dryer that we have within our home. Replacing some pretty old ceiling fans. So every bedroom upstairs has ceiling fans, so we're replacing those. They already had LED lights in them, but are now going to be properly sized and newer technology. So I think that'll save a little bit. Then part of that electric panel moving, as well as upsizing, was not just for this heat pump, but also to plan for an electric car in the future. So upsize the panel so that we could accommodate that when we're ready to buy another car if we need to. Who knows, right? Who knows what the future holds. But just a couple of quick things, like you're not alone on this. So I think the vetting wolves, myself, Drew, I don't want to speak for the other two, but willing to be a resource for things that you're thinking about or projects that you're considering or ways that we might be able to be helpful. I know Ivan, same way, done a lot of work on his home to electrify it, and all very willing to kind of share best practices or approaches on trying to answer questions that may come up as folks are working through this, because it is hard to navigate. You don't know if you're being kind of played or not, and having folks that you can ask kind of honest questions and have honest conversations with goes a long way. And then some just groups to keep in mind where you can meet people, and if you don't already know them, or where to find these greenies within the community. Here are 5 kind of good places where people tend to show up interested and motivated to talk about these things on a consistent basis. So I encourage you to check those out. I see a cell phone photos being taken, so that's good. And that was my last slide. So that's all we had. And yeah, I think we're ready to stick around and answer any questions that people may have. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Kevin. And thanks, Drew and Matt, really appreciate it. I am going to pull up a spreadsheet here. Some of the, this out of the way. So we've started, like, this is my home, Beddings, Dave Reichert, Drew, Kevin. This is a home that Mike Allen Builders built. It's just phenomenal. And then Schulmeyer, he's Paul's on the line here. And so these are just, we started collecting, year build, all electric, what heating, cooling system did you go to? So some of these things, like, the data for what in some cases, who we use to install it, domestic hot water, stove, clothes dryer, EV charger, mowers, and solar generation. So anyway, all of this stuff, we're trying to find a place to house it. So it'll be a resource for everyone. So we're still working on that. So yeah. But I'm going to open it up for questions now. We got a fairly small group here, and so I'm just going to, if you want to unmute and ask a question, go ahead.
Ivan, can you hear me?
Yep.
So this is Paul Schulmeyer. One of the things in listening to Drew and Kevin and Matt is that what I'm noticing, and from my experience as well, is the lack of training and knowledge and understanding of the from the HVAC community in installing and sizing, especially for homes that are above standard for insulation, and how to put these heat pumps in and how to size them. And it would be great if we could find a way to get these people, these contractors trained so that they know what kind of equipment is out there, so they're not oversizing, and so we can have a larger variety of contractors to pick from. So that's what I'm throwing out there, is how can we get these guys trained, or where can we find an expert who really actually knows, besides our experience, you know, what they can teach these guys so that they can, and gals, so that they can come in and give us the right information.
You know, Paul, you have a great point, and I think this is an excellent business opportunity for somebody, to be honest with you. When you get into these trades of, like Kevin was saying, he needed to upgrade his panel for installing a water heater if you were to install it. A lot of these HVAC contractors do not have an electrician on staff. So there are multiple trades involved when you're looking at HVAC and electrifying a home, in which it would be good for a third party, a nonpartisan, you know, unbiased individual or a group of people to come in, evaluate a home, calculate its overall load, provide that to the customer, and let them know some options available and some key contacts for electricians. I think you have a great point.
So Matt, does XRG have those people on board? Is Matt still here?
Yeah, Matt's here, yep.
Yeah.
And actually, maybe Megan can answer that better. Megan, would you mind pitching in on that? Sorry, Matt. Megan used to work for XRG, so she knows them very well.
I would say XRG Concepts has the tools to calculate the load. I wouldn't say they have a whole lot of experience suggesting contractors. I think that's one thing they try to avoid doing, is suggesting a certain contractor. Yeah, I guess I'll leave it at that. But they definitely have the Manual J software, and they can help determine the size of the heating and cooling system that you would need. But yeah, in terms of contractors that are willing and able to do this in town, is still lacking for sure.
I will say that there is a Minnesota card grant that the CEE is doing with current contractors to train them. COVID put a huge hiccup in that. So a lot of that training can't be done in person, is being done in virtually. I'm not sure. Oh, looks like Adam or Matt was kicked out. So yeah, I think training needs to be done, and I think that heat pumps are really coming up now, where they're talking about it and they're going to be doing it more. We probably won't have this problem in 3 years, maybe 5 years, but it's going to take some time.
There are several conferences in the area that do provide education on this. The Better Buildings, Better Business Conference in Wisconsin, I've been to a few times, and they provide a lot of good training. Well, I shouldn't say training, a lot of educational sessions specifically for HVAC people, but I guess like the actual training isn't there.
So
Another thing.
go ahead, Paul.
All right. Well, another thing I noticed when seeing either I think it was the numbers that Drew put up on his heating, the kilowatts dedicated for heating. The reason why I keep bringing up the sizing and the HVAC contractors is if we really understand what we need to size for, then we can understand how big a PV system we may need to put up, especially if we have the solar window up on our roof or wherever we have access to accommodate that heat pump and that heat pump hot water heater. Because when you start adding in all these electric appliances, the size of your PV array is really growing quite a bit. And so sizing is really important in order to get that PV array sized properly so that you're not putting up more than you need.
Good, thanks, Paul. This is actually, okay, I have a question, and then I have some myths that I want to bust here. First, my question is, and I don't totally understand this yet, so Drew, Kevin, you both have the air handling unit. So if I'm understanding this correctly, in my mind, I mean, I have an A coil for my air conditioning, air coolant comes in, and that transfers it to the air. Is that also the way it works for the heating? Is there an A coil in there basically? Is that how the heat gets transferred?
They're known as a condenser and an evaporator. So in a regular air conditioning system, your outside unit is the condenser, the inside unit is the evaporator on the air conditioning cycle. And when there's a reversing valve that actually changes those. So instead of heat moves from hot to cold. So you make that A coil cold, warm air moves to it, right? And then when it warms that up, then you send it outside and you compress it and release it, and it cools down. It's a Venturi effect. So you just basically do that opposite for heating season.
Okay, so still using the same A coil.
Yes.
Good. That solidifies my understanding of the whole air handling unit thing. And that makes the point about, you know, you can keep if you got a good furnace there originally, a good gas furnace, it's easy to just, rather than installing an air conditioner, you can install a heat pump and then just use your gas as a backup. So that makes a lot of sense now. So that cleared up a few things for me. Let's see, Chris put in the comments here that there are some resources. Oh, wait, there are some resources, the Minnesota Air Source Heat Pump Collaborative, mnashp.org. So there's some resources there. And Al Hoffman put in, would MREA, Minnesota Renewable Energy Association in Wisconsin, who has an annual energy fair each year, be a good resource? Could be too. Yeah. So I had some myths that I wanted to bust here. So these are things that you hear. First off, heat pump technology doesn't work in our cold climate. I think we've busted that myth tonight. So, and then the next one is, if you have a heat pump, you have to have a gas backup. Okay. No, we've shown tonight you can have electric or gas. There's benefits, pros and cons both ways, but it doesn't have to be gas backup. Third one is, it costs way more in electricity for a heat pump versus gas heating. So according to Drew's numbers there, directly comparing electric to gas, they're very similar. And I know I did with my water heater, I did a comparison to my gas water heater from next door. Very similar square footages, very, very similar. The cost to operate those was about the same.
I'd like to add on that as well, that I do not have the monthly customer charge included in that. So if you take the monthly customer charge and add that in there, right now it's a wash between my heat pump and natural gas.
Yeah, good. Thanks, Drew. Next one is, if the you know, what if the electricity goes off to my house, you know, which according to Drew, it never goes off, but we all know it does once in a while. But, you know, so that's always the big thing. So, but if the power goes off, my gas furnace will still work. No, gas furnaces don't work because they have an electric fan and they have electronics controlling it. So no, you're not going to have heat. If electricity goes off, you're not going to have heat, whether it's you're using gas as a primary or electric. So back me up on that. I mean, that's right. I mean, that's true.
That's absolutely true. The only way you would have any heat is if you'd have a direct vent fireplace, natural gas, you could run that, or if you have a wood fireplace or a wood stove. But yeah, otherwise a air handling unit, furnace, your traditional type of a gas furnace would not operate with electricity at present.
Unless you're in Texas where you just burn your furniture, then you're good. And the last one is, I really like my gas cooktop because it's so fast. Induction cooktops are as fast and easy to control. So we've got an induction cooktop. They rock. I mean, it is fast. And so, yeah, so that was just some things that some input that I wanted to put in there. So, and then some other things as far as, I think Drew, you touched on some of this, the benefits of an all electric home, no carbon monoxide, no gas leak danger, no combustion air is required. In case of power outage, there are no pilot lights to be relit. So those are just some side benefits of, I think an all electric home is very clean and it's also very safe. So a lot of benefits in my mind. So with that, I'll open it up to more questions.
If I might, sorry to be asking so many questions, but we're not all electric, and so I am kind of curious about how the heat pumps are working. So I think I asked Drew, I think it was Drew, it might have been Matt, about have you had any consideration about turning on your electric resistance coil in your air handler at a higher temperature to reduce some of the condensation and icing?
It's not going to reduce any condensation. All your condensation is happening with the outside air. So that's out of the adiabatic system, right? So that's not going to help that. They do have it. So you are robbing from your home's air to defrost that coil. So like my heat pump has the option, you can turn up the backup heat so you're more comfortable. I really didn't notice it until it got down to about 5 degrees and until my wife whined, and then I had to turn it on for that lower temperature. So I guess I could have dealt with it, but my wife didn't like it. So I turned it on for the lower temperatures, but that was just for comfort. It wasn't for condensation.
And we don't have any in-duct electric resistant heat, and our outdoor condensers sit above a rock bed and not near a sidewalk. And while we've noticed some condensation, it hasn't been as bad as Drew's.
I don't have any experience yet to share, so sorry about that.
And so Matt, I wonder if, part of the reason why you've made out a little better there is because of you get a lot more passive heating. So your heat load may be lesser.
That could be, and it's a smaller heat pump, a different brand. Certainly, we have a garage, we have a steel roof, and we certainly get piles of snow like right in front of there. And so if there was a lot of condensation, we would have seen it and I haven't seen much, so I don't know. It could just be brand or how much energy we're actually using. Don't know.
Two things on that is that yeah, for physics wise, it's all about runtime. So it doesn't matter on brands, you'll produce the same amount of condensation depending on the humidity of the air. But it's going to be runtime, and it's going to be, mine is on the east side of the house. It's not on the south side. I think yours, Matt, is on the south side, so you probably get some
No,
some.
it's on the north side, but
It is on the north side.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
So yeah, I was thinking that was part of it too, but it's probably more so runtime.
Do you know how many kilowatt hours you put through that thing?
In my thing there, that was December through March, and what was that number? It was like
4,000 maybe.
yeah, it was just under 4,000 at that point. So
Yeah, we're like a little more than half than that.
okay. And I think that rock bed that you have helps too.
I have a question as a new homeowner. How do I know when it's time to replace my heating, cooling, or water heater system? I don't think it's ideal to wait till it stops working. I did notice that RPU's rebates only qualify if you're replacing a non-working gas item. I think that's how that goes.
You
Otherwise, the
didn't hear
rebate.
it from me, but you should take a hammer to it.
So yeah, my furnace and I think the air conditioner were both installed in 95. So I'm just curious when I know to replace it. And I obviously want to be planning ahead for when I do need to.
So this is Paul. And so I do home inspections and I see furnaces, that are 40 years old and some that are that may not need replacing and some that are 5 to 10 years old that, are really looking rough. And it all depends on maintenance and service during the lifespan of the unit. But really, to be honest with you, they're built kind of with a lifespan of around 20 years. And actually some states, say, once you hit 17 or 18 or 20 years on a unit, you hit the lifespan of that unit and you should consider replacing it. And there are lots of different ways or reasons to do that. One might be efficiency, but you also pick up other things with newer units like the cycling, which even like 5 years ago, you had a hard time buying units that could, have different cycle times. And so the air handler would be using less energy with newer units, even with the higher efficiency. But if you're around 20, 25 years, you're probably looking at something that would be worth replacing, even if it's still running.
So another just thing to point out here, and to Kevin's point, and it's things that when we renovated our home here, we upgraded from 100 amps to 200 amps for the house. One of the big things, we have an electric boiler. We're all electric, but it's a boiler versus for our in-floor heat versus a heat pump. So we needed some pretty big amp, plus 50 amps of that is for the electric vehicle. So, I mean, if you're planning on electrifying and moving, kind of getting ready for the future with EVs and stuff like that, you probably need 200 amps. So that's just another thing to plan for, like Megan. You got to think about that as another. It's not just perhaps the heat pump and of course your existing gas furnace and gas water heater. There's very little electricity there, so 100 amps is plenty. But when you start moving these other things, not to say you shouldn't do it, but it's just something that you need to do in the planning of those replacements.
And for us at our house, Megan, I don't know the best reason. I think it was more just like being worried about being in the middle of winter and not having heat, being kind of the justification for us. And when we were kind of ready to make that financial jump to do it, you know, and we had in Maine, something happened with our home heating system and we had been without heat, and it was, of course it happens when it's like minus 30 degrees out and you don't have a whole lot of options on figuring out like, what do you do next? You know, and we didn't really want to be in that experience again. So that would kind of encourage the discussion and plan making process a little bit.
Yeah, and then I just want to reiterate one more time, you know, Paul's and note about, you know, making sure you do the load calculations, getting several quotes, do your homework. Unfortunately, it takes more work right now to do it. You know, you gotta really want it, unfortunately, until we get a little farther down the road. One of the other people who have been kind of working with this small group of electric homeowners is Mike Allen from Mike Allen Builders, and he's building some awesome homes. He's certified for passive house now, so he's going to have be doing his first passive house next winter. So he's just really, and I believe that, you know, he's been involved at the state level as far as green building. So I think he'll be a good advocate. He's really busy, unfortunately, because he's really good. But the more we can get him kind of involved, he might be able to help out a little bit on the Rochester area builders end of things, as far as maybe creating some of those resources. So hopefully, so this right here is a good start for this. So. Are there last call for questions or any last points by any of the speakers?
I just want to say, oh, go ahead, Jeremy.
Okay, I was just gonna say, I know IXOs and Bedding Wolves, I think both of you have cement floor in at least part of your house, and just having worked in industrial settings in the past and not feeling good at the end of the day after walking on that, I was just wondering how you've found that flooring.
No problem.
Huh?
It's not like we're walking on it all the time. So it's nice,
Yeah.
especially when it's a passive heating day. You can feel the warmth from the floor. But no, we haven't had any problems with like standing on it for a length of time.
Okay. Great.
And I'm actually going to let Mary answer that. Mary, can you?
Yeah, and I don't see a problem with it either. I do have where you know, in the kitchen area next to the sink and the stove, those, I don't know what you call them, you know.
Oh, like little stress mats or something?
Stress mats, there you go. Yeah.
Okay.
Because that would be where I might be standing for a period of time, but otherwise, no, I like them. There's so many benefits to it that, yeah, and you know, it wouldn't be as if you were standing, you know, working in a manufacturing line or something and just standing for 8 hours a day. You know, maybe that would make a difference, but otherwise, the benefits far outweigh that, I think.
And a follow-up, how thick is the thermal mass of your floors?
Ours is 4 inches.
Okay.
Ours is also 4 inches, specifically designed at that depth to capture as much solar energy during the day, but not to be so thick to be expensive. So it's kind of a balance, and like everyone's like 4 inches is what you need.
Great.
And I will also add, so we also put the concrete on over our basement, which was built in 1890. So it's actually 3 inches at one end of the room and 4 inches at the other end of the room. And a lot of support underneath there to hold all that. So they had to beef up the basement a little bit to manage that.
I want to add that in our former house, we did a 2-inch concrete pour with in-floor heat over the plywood. It is possible. The home was built in '65, and so if it, you can get engineering specs, and they can tell you what weight it can hold. So we did a gypcrete pour. The floor comes up to the temperature it came up the temperature much quicker than a 4-inch slab, but of course it lost the heat more quickly as well. But we were able, and we had a gas boiler heating that floor, but you can do it on a retrofit. It is possible, and you can pour on an existing plywood deck.
Great. Thanks, Paul.
And I'll add, Paul, you also had a solar thermal for heating that in-floor heat at that house. That was a really cool house.
We gave that system, long story. MREA now has the system. But you know, that's another day, another story.
Yeah.
Before we sign off, I wanted to give a plug to an event happening next Tuesday, Energy Efficiency for Your Home. We will hear from someone from Citizens Utility Board, RPU, and Minnesota Energy Resources talking about all things energy efficiency, specifically for your home. You can find that on the Earthfest website on the events calendar.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Have a good night.
Night.